We have lots to discuss here in today's video. It's been a very busy news day. Today we're looking at a lot of offseason trades and free agent speculation. The trade front, we're looking at the Edmonton Oilers. Lots of talk around them after last night's Stanley Cup final was completed. Could they swing a big deal involving a goaltender with the Anaheim Ducks, and what other pieces might be moved for them this offseason? We'll discuss that, plus some trade talk around the Islanders and the Bruins, or some talks brewing that might involve the 7th overall pick, which might allow the Islanders to double dip on the top end of the draft this year, plus some trade talk around the Rangers and the Anaheim Ducks. We had a trade earlier between the Devils and the Predators, which we'll talk about in case you missed it earlier. Plus, we found out as well another video earlier saying that the Oilers are being investigated for their LTIR use. Ryan Donato is staying with Chicago, and we have a big update on Predators captain Roman Josi. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here. Tonight's been a very busy, very newsworthy day. Before we jump into a lot of the news, of course, I just want to quickly touch on the fact that a longtime NHL veteran has announced his retirement, and that's Nick Bonino, 37 years old, played 15 NHL seasons with a variety of teams. Started off, of course, playing college hockey for Boston University. Went on to start his career with the Anaheim Ducks, played with Vancouver, Pittsburgh, I think on multiple occasions, Nashville, Minnesota, the Rangers, the Sharks. They had a lot of stops along the way. Won back-to-back Stanley Cups with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Ultimately, played a lot of games, a lot of success, and obviously carved a role that HBK line that he was with Hagelin and Castle during one of the Penguins Cup runs was, quite a big part of that team's success. He had a pretty solid career. He ended up being a little bit of a journeyman, but I think he's probably going to most be remembered for the Cup runs with the Penguins, and that's actually where he's going to be working. Bonino also, along with announcing his retirement, also announces that he's accepted a coaching job with the Penguins. I'm not sure exactly what his role is going to specifically be, but he will be part of the Pens coaching staff as an assistant coach. Of course, last night we saw the Stanley Cup make its appearance. The Panthers have run it back again, back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. The Oilers fall short again in the Stanley Cup final, this time in Game 6. Last year was Game 7. We saw the Oilers just kind of run into a really frustrating effort. Basically, the Panthers smelt blood, and they just completely smothered Edmonton. To be completely honest, that's the way it went. That's just the way the style they play. They forecheck, they cause turnovers, they smother the neutral zone. Might not be a real exciting brand of hockey at times, but it's effective. Obviously, it works, and they were able to shut the Oilers down. Sam Reinhart ended up with a 4-goal performance last night, 2 of them into empty nets. The Oilers surprisingly pulled a goalie with 7 minutes left, down 3 goals. I was shocked, and they ended up giving up an empty net goal fairly quick. All in all, really for the most part, even though it was a 4-2 series win for Florida, it was a pretty dominant victory. I almost think the gap widened between the Panthers and the Oilers this year as compared to last. I mean, I think some people thought the Oilers got better this year. I don't know that they did really, maybe in some aspects, but compared to Florida, if they got better, then Florida just got that much better again. This version of the Panthers, to me, was even better than last year, and be curious to see what they do with a lot of their offseason moves to see if they can run it back. They're primed now to possibly run into making this a dynasty. In my opinion, to be a dynasty, you have to have 3 championships, either consecutively over like a 4 or 5 year span. So we'll see 3 straight appearances in the Stanley Cup final. At some point, you got to ask yourself, that's a lot of hockey in a lot of years. Are they going to run out of gas? We also, learned as well that Sam Bennett won the Conn Smythe Trophy. Marchand was the runner-up, pretty close in the voting, actually. So Bennett, of course, led the league in playoff goals. So well-deserved there. I'm surprised Bobrovsky didn't get any love. He did get a few second and third place votes, but no first place votes. I thought he should at least gotten more consideration because he was really good for them down the stretch here. And we also learned Matthew Tkachuk's injury, which we kind of knew was fairly serious. At least it had to be to miss as much time in the regular season as he did. And the first interview we did after winning the Cup, he didn't want to talk about it, but then not long after talking to one of the American networks, he did reveal it and said that he had a torn adductor, where torn the muscle right off the bone, and he also had a hernia all on the same side of his body, which is pretty significant. I mean, a torn abductor, for that to be completely torn like that, you're normally looking at like a 6-month recovery. So he obviously missed time after 4 Nations, the rest of the regular season. I do expect, I mean, we don't know for sure, but I would think he's probably going to need surgery this summer, and I would suspect he's probably going to be late starting next year, but we'll have to wait for further updates on that. All in all, the season's over, and the Panthers, again, are your Stanley Cup champions. Of course, I did a video last night discussing the series in case you want more of a evaluation or analysis on my part for that. And a bunch of other news that already transpired here today. We saw a trade between the Devils and the Predators. The Devils have traded Erik Haula to Nashville for a 2025 fourth-round pick and prospect Jeremy Hansel. We knew the Devils were looking to move Haula to create some cap space and roster space. That is not surprising in the least. A little surprising he ends up in Nashville. As I said in that trade video I did earlier, not really clear exactly what the Preds are going to do or what direction they're going to go in here. Obviously, they loaded up on free agent talent last year, spent a ton of money, and it backfired. They were one of the worst teams in the league. So I don't know what direction we're going to see them go. Now they add another aging veteran. So not really sure where Barry Trotz is going with this, but I know he's played there before, familiarity, of course, but we'll see. Good for New Jersey. Not much we can say. A couple of signings as well today. Ryan Donato staying with the Blackhawks, signing a 4-year deal at $4 million per season. I know it wasn't quite clear if that was going to work out or not, considering they've been negotiating for quite a long time, even dating back to prior to the trade deadline. They started talking extension, and they never got there. Obviously, they must have been confident enough that he was going to end up working out to stay, where they never traded him, because it would have been a decent return with the season he was having. Donato signs a 4-year deal at $4 million per year. Based on how last year went, that's a pretty fair contract based on his production. So hopefully he can keep it up, because that was certainly the best one of his career. A little bit of a late blooming surge in his production there. So we'll see how things work out on that front. The Rangers have re-signed Matt Rempe as well. I know the Rangers are a little concerned, not only for themselves, but it sounds like they might be aggressive in the offer sheet market too. But I think they were a little concerned about Rempe maybe being one of those potential targets. I know Will Cooley's another one to watch. Keandre Miller's probably going to be traded, which we'll discuss later, so less likely there. But Rempe sends a 2-year deal, just shy of $1 million, $975. So I think that's a fair contract for what he brings, and we'll see how things work out. Hopefully he can kind of, keep himself out of trouble. He's a huge specimen of a man, and he just, I think, needs to learn how to play within, so he's not taking people's heads off at every turn here. But he can be effective, and he's got some skill too. I think he just needs to learn a few things on how to play at this level, so that he's not getting himself in trouble with player safety all the time. And the other signing we had today as well as the Anaheim Ducks have signed Nikita Nesterov. He gets a 2-year contract, a one-way deal, $787,500. So decent deal there for somebody who saw limited action in the NHL, in a fair bit of action, and their AHL affiliate. Another story that was unexpected that we learned about today was the health condition of Predators captain Roman Josi. Now, we knew that Josi suffered a concussion as a result from a Sam Bennett situation towards the end of last season. So apparently he's been having issues with his health kind of ever since. He hasn't really fully recovered. He was having some other symptoms. He wondered if it could be concussion related. And after going through some extensive, testing and appointments with doctors, they've come to the conclusion they've diagnosed him with what they call POTS. Now, if you're not familiar with POTS, it's a condition that stands for postural tachycardia syndrome. Basically, now he's convinced that the concussion caused it, but I think it's more likely that a concussion may have maybe just kind of flared it up. I'm not really sure, but it's a scenario where you can run. It's a cardiac condition. It can cause you to have low blood pressure, which really affects your energy. It can cause you to have a high heart rate as well. Typically, the only things you can really do as far as, when you're having bad symptoms, is laying down is good relief. But when you're up on your feet, it can be kind of make the situation worse. Now, this is something that is not real common in men. I mean, it obviously can happen. The most common scenario that people that get it is like women in that, probably 25 to 50 range. Actually, I do know somebody who has this condition. I've seen them, unfortunately, have to battle through it. And it can be a pretty serious thing that they are off work for an extended period of time. And of course, they're not a professional athlete. This lady I know that has it as a nurse, and was off work for, I think it had to be about a year. So I mean, I know a lot of it too was getting it properly diagnosed. That's a lot of it, but essentially, you just kind of always feel like you're drug out. Like it's, he was having headaches, he was having a lot of fatigue and just not feeling right, And like I said, a lot of it he kind of chucked up to maybe he was not over his concussion yet. He's been going through treatment, been taking medication, which I believe they give him like a beta blocker or something. He's apparently doing much better. Expected to be able to play next year, but I don't know. I don't want to make this sound worse than what it is. I'm not a doctor, but based on what I've seen firsthand of this condition, it can be pretty serious. I do honestly have concern for his ability to play. Like I said, knowing the person I've seen go through this, and like I said, with a profession where you're kind of on your feet a lot, and it's a demanding job, but not a professional athlete. It's not, you know what I mean? Like, look at how much effort and everything goes into their work, right? I find it hard to imagine it'd be that quickly that they could get it under control and have him resume normal activity. I mean, I hope for his sake that they do. Just wondering if it could be more serious than what they've let on. So I hope for his sake it's not, but it can be a really difficult thing to get under control and to get to a point where your life feels somewhat normal again. So something definitely worth monitoring, and we certainly want to keep our thoughts with him, and hopefully this doesn't prolong him, keeping him out of the game, because he's a fantastic talent, elite player, huge for his team, good for the league, good for his country, Switzerland. So hopefully he can continue playing like they say they expect him to be able to in the fall. And now, some free agent rumors around the league. Of course, we know the Panthers are going to be one of the more interesting teams to watch when it comes to UFAs. Of course, they just won their second Stanley Cup. Key members of that team, including Sam Bennett, Brad Marchand, and Aaron Ekblad, are all expiring contracts, all pending unrestricted free agents. I know there was some speculation the other day that if they made it to free agency, that the Leafs would be a team to watch going after both Bennett and Marchand. I'm not so sure they're going to be able to do that. And there was more talk today from some insiders saying that they don't think, even if he doesn't come to a deal with Florida, that Bennett wants to go home to Toronto, that he's more likely to play in the States. But I'm not sure exactly what his wishes are, but that doesn't sound like he wants to go there. Marchand, on the other hand, everything Marchand has said sounds like he's pretty open to going just about anywhere, as long as he feels it's the right fit and the right contract. Now, the belief is amongst these three players is that they can probably keep two, and for the most part, the belief was, up until probably a few weeks ago, that it probably was going to be Ekblad and Bennett. The longtime Panthers will stay. Marchand will come in, help them win a cup, and he'll likely move on. And that could be the way it works out. But now it's kind of looking more and more likely that Ekblad would have to take a big discount. We already know that. That's not earth-shattering news, but it sounds like the discount that they'd want him to take is bigger than what he may want to, and that he might be the one who ends up leaving, which will open the door for them possibly being able to keep Marchand. I think Bennett's probably the closest thing to a slam dunk amongst the three to stay. Marchand, if he were to stay, that would just really make them that much more of a threat for a three-peat. But he will have no shortage of a good market for sure. Like everybody's saying, he's likely going to command 3 or 4 year deal, $8 million or more now. If he stays in Florida, maybe he takes a little bit less. Really, you're living on the beach, winning Stanley Cups, finish out your last few years of your career. Like, who wouldn't want to do that? So it sounds more and more likely that Bennett and Marchand have an opportunity to both stay in Florida together, and it might be Ekblad that moves on. There's going to be certainly a good group of teams interested in his services too, but we'll see where things go. I think Florida, if you look at last year, they kind of had to revamp their blue line a bit, and they did that. They lost Montour, they lost Ekman-Larsson, and they figured that out. The blue line this year came back as good or better, and now, of course, we've got Ekblad. They brought in Seth Jones, and I think not only was the Jones acquisition to make the team better, but I also think a lot of that was to do with possibly kind of playing a role that Ekblad has played for them here moving forward, like it's Ekblad insurance type of deal. So I think that's the more likely way that it plays out as of the information we have today, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, lots to talk around the Edmonton Oilers. I'm going to start first with the story that we broke earlier today. Just a couple hours back, there was a video on the channel from the Frank Seravalli Daily Faceoff reports saying that the Oilers are under investigation for the usage of LTIR for the Vander Kane contract, which shocked me to know that the season's over now and they're still looking at this. Makes no sense. We know that a lot of LTIR scenarios get scrutinized and they have to provide documentation at times to show the medical reports, what have you, to make sure that they're not being, that they're being cap compliant, or it's not cap compliant, CBA compliant, which is also caused them to be cap compliant or not, I guess, right? So they're looking at the whole Kane thing. Of course, we know Kane missed the entire season. He had a major surgery in the fall, which I don't think anybody's questioning that. I think the part of it that raises some questions is the fact that about halfway through his recovery, he had knee surgery, and then that set everything back on the other part of the recovery, and he rehabbed and went with it, and then that kind of almost made sure that he was going to not be back till the playoffs. And I think there's some questions around that. So I know the sources are telling Seravalli that the Oilers didn't, or at least don't feel like they did anything wrong. So it's a scenario to watch because there could be retroactive punishment, and we don't know how that's going to play out. But I did do a video that I went into a lot more detail explaining everything. So check that out if you haven't already, just on the channel from a couple hours back. But that is a news story today that's worth monitoring. And when it comes to Edmonton, we know that they're going to be looking to make changes. Obviously, 2 years in a row in the Stanley Cup final, and they walk away with no Stanley Cups. They need to get better, and they need to figure out what they need to do. A lot of talk today about some key trade pieces on that team. A couple of names to watch, including Vander Kane. He's got 1 year left, just over $5 million. He does have a modified no trade clause, so there's about half the league they could send him to without their permission or his permission. The other half of the league he would have to waive. I don't think he had a very good Stanley Cup final, and as much as they wouldn't be completely opposed to keeping him around for what he's getting paid, I don't think it's money well spent anymore, and it might make sense for them each side to kind of move on. Another name to watch might be probably a little less likely, but Adam Henrique at $3 million. I think that it probably will be wait and see what else they can do first, but it could be a name. Arvidsson's another one. Victor Arvidsson, a more likely name, $4 million. Does have a no move though. I'm surprised they give out these no move clauses way too often and put themselves in handcuffs. But if he's willing to work with them and they can move that off the books, I mean, the depth pieces they brought in last year just didn't work out. Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson were not good signings. On paper, it sounded good. Like, okay, maybe they'll be a better team, but they weren't. So he needs to go, ideally, and it wasn't a good fit. So if they can move on from that contract and the Kane contract, they can give them some more flexibility. They got to find a new deal for Evan Bouchard. They get Leon Draisaitl's contract kicking in next year. So those are some names that you're likely going to hear about and see as potential pieces to move to free up money to do some other things. And of course, goaltending is another one that's going to get a lot of scrutiny this offseason. What are they going to do? A lot of Oilers reporters are suggesting that we could see a variety of scenarios here, and it's not quite clear how it's going to play out, but they are expected to address it after 2 consecutive years of not. They kind of, I think, acknowledge now that they don't have a choice. Like I said in the Oilers offseason plan video, the goaltending was a problem. I mean, in games 5 and 6, the fact that they couldn't score was just as big of a problem, but it doesn't make the fact that the goaltending was bad less of an issue. Because, ultimately when you're playing from behind as much as the Oilers were, sometimes you just need a save. I think there were times when the Oilers got scored on early, they looked frustrated, they looked depleted, and when you're playing from behind, it's that much more exhausting. And I'm not blaming it all on the goalies, but it's like sometimes you just need them to be exceptional for you and to bail you out. And they just weren't getting that. And I think it's pretty clear that Stuart Skinner is, at times he's brilliant, and at times he's terrible. And I hate to say that because Stu Skinner seems like a really good person, a really good teammate, really good dude. But I don't think he's ready to be that full-fledged starting number one guy. So they're either going to bring in a goalie that can play ahead of him and he can work with and be either a 1A, 1B or something along those lines, but a more experienced goalie who you can trust for the playoffs more. And then, That's one scenario, so that he stays, because he's only making $2.5 million. So it's not like he was making a huge amount of money and not getting the job done. He could be a decent backup or a 1B at that kind of salary. So it could mean that if that's the case, that Pickard probably gets moved. Or the other scenario is that they move both goalies and go with a completely different tandem next year. Because really, as much as Pickard was a good backup, he wasn't phenomenal. It's not like he can't be replaced. But there is a scenario where they do move Skinner and Pickard stays. Obviously, he's only making $1 million for another season. He really, to me, Pickard, like if he's your backup, it's not. I think that's a serviceable situation. But if he's going to be your backup, ideally you need a goalie who can log a big workload and be trustworthy to get the job done. But I think the Oilers are going to be reluctant, if you will, to move on from Skinner at a younger age, local product, been through a lot, get a ton of experience. 3 years really as a full-time NHL goalie, 2 Stanley Cup final appearances. He's put a lot of miles on that and a lot of experience in his short career. You don't want to see him figure things out in a few years down the road, winning a cup somewhere else. So I think they're less likely to probably part with him if they can find the deal. Now, one thing that was suggested was maybe they swing a deal with one of these names already mentioned with the Ducks. And maybe, because it's been talked about before, that John Gibson, who does have some trade protection, would be willing to go to the Oilers. How about an Evander Kane for John Gibson trade? Does that not make sense for both sides? Gibson, has the 2 years on his deal, right? Making a little bit more money than Kane, so they probably have to do something. Either you add another player off the Oilers roster to level out the money. Maybe Anaheim retains just a little bit so that the contracts are closer to even. They get a power forward and Evander Kane who can hopefully help them with the young guys. They just added Chris Kreider. I think he would fit the style of play that Pat Verbeek likes. His family gets to go back to California where they spent a lot of time before. I think it's a win-win, to be honest. And Gibson might not be the absolute stud star goalie out there, but he's got a pretty decent track record. And he certainly has a lot more experience and theoretically could be more reliable than Skinner. So you could see a tandem of Gibson and Skinner, and maybe Pickard's included in that deal, because obviously they have Lucas Dostal, who's expected to take over the starting reins, but they would likely need a backup. Based on what their depth chart says, I don't think there's really anybody else in the organization ready to step up. They have Ville Husso. I'm not sure they're expected to re-sign him. They could take Pickard. It could be like a Kane and Pickard for Gibson type of trade or something along those lines. That very well could work out. So that's something to keep an eye on. Expect Edmonton and Anaheim maybe to engage, because they have before. It's never quite worked out. And like I said, we've heard that Gibson would be amenable to going to a team like Edmonton. So we'll have to see how that goes. The Oilers are also working on an extension for Trent Frederick. It might not be announced for a while yet, because they are engaging in a lot of other negotiations with their other pending UFAs. So they're probably talking to some other players. Obviously, they got the Bouchard RFA deal that they got to work on. You've got Connor Brown's also a UFA as well as Frederick and a few others. So I'm not sure that it's going to be announced for, probably closer to July 1st would be my guess. But it's rumored to be an 8-year deal, somewhere in the 3.5 to 3.75 range, which to me seems like a lot. But they have obviously a lot of faith in this guy, so we'll see. But it could be a bit of an overpayment in my estimation. Now, some other things to watch. One, Frank Saravalli is reporting that there's a ton of interest around K'Andre Miller, the Rangers, and in many is 12 to 15 teams. He says it's not just smoke, there's fire around this. So very, very much expected that he's going to be traded. Just a matter of where he goes and what the return is. Lots of teams are interested, close to half the league. So we'll see on that front. There's really no front runner or anything like that as of yet. A lot of insiders are also saying that they're not hearing a whole lot about Alexis Lafreniere, so it seems less likely that he's going to be traded. Things could always change, of course, but I know Elliot Friedman even mentioned that he's done some checking, because there were some reports, including the New York Post, Molly Walker and Larry Brooks previously had reported that he was going to be available for trade, and maybe to some degree he is. Maybe there's just not a lot of chatter around him. Some insiders think his contract and how he played last year might make him very difficult to move, and it could be just that there's not much interest, based on that contract. So we'll see how that goes, but the Rangers are getting a ton of interest in him. That's one of the moves. They're expected to make. Mika Zibanejad, as we talked about the other day, not expected to be traded at this point. At this point, it sounds like they're going to try to fix his game and see if they can rehabilitate him, basically. Mike Sullivan went to Sweden to meet with them. They just got a new house. Like, everything's lining up that he's going to stay. It sounds like he's probably going to play the wing next year, move him from center to probably the wing with JT Miller, and see if they can't get his game going at a higher level like he's certainly capable of. So we'll see how that goes. And another one, back to the Ducks for a second as well. And another name to watch there is Trevor Zegras. I know I've seen Pat Verbeek make mention that in an interview that Leo Carlson and Mason McTavish are expected to be the team's top 2 centers this year. You get Ryan Strome in the third spot. They got lots of wingers too. You know, obviously, they just got Chris Kreider, but you got Cutter Gauthier as a young up-and-coming winger. All right, you got Troy Terry, who you never know. There was some speculation that maybe he would be dealt, but that was kind of pushed back for the team, so it's probably not. You know, you still got Alex Killorn. You've got, you know, a number of other guys here. Frank Vetrano, another one. Like, is Trevor Zegras going to be a third-line player if he stays in Anaheim? To me, that's just not where he's suited. So, I don't know. To me, I do honestly think there's a better chance that maybe he could be moved. So we'll see. I know he had a social media post excited that Chris Kreider came to the Ducks. Obviously, he spent some time getting to know him before and excited to be teammates, but I honestly wonder if he's going to be there come fall. So we'll see where that goes. And the other thing I want to touch on as well is the Bruins and the Islanders. There's a lot of chatter that these two teams are having some trade conversations, and a couple of pieces that we know of, or at least are to some degree on the table, but it sounds like what's being discussed could be part of a larger deal. But I know Jean-Gabriel Pageau's name is out there, and if he doesn't end up going to Boston, it sounds like there's a pretty good chance he's going somewhere. There's enough interest. He's done a 1 year in his deal, $5 million. Islanders could always maybe even retain a little bit. But, you know, at the end of the day, there's interest in him. He's being discussed in this potential deal that could work out between the two clubs here. The number 7 overall pick, which belongs to the Bruins right now, is reportedly also on the table. I know there was also a lot of people speculating that the Islanders are trying to get another high-end pick in this draft, because obviously they're picking first overall. They're expected to take Matthew Schaefer, but it seems like they're trying to figure out a way that they can also get James Haggins. Of course, Haggins is a local product, grew up loving the Islanders, has made it well known he'd love nothing more than to win a cup with them someday. He's a great, talented kid as well, which could really help them here kind of turn things around, as they really need to focus on building up this team through some younger players. They've got Cole Yzerman. Him and Yzerman are great friends and have great chemistry, so there's also that aspect of things to look at as well. They picked up Cal Ritchie in the Brock Nelson trade. They're starting to get some more young talent. They got a few young D that are starting to come along as well. And if you get Matthew Schaefer, that's a game changer. So I'm not sure what else would all have to be involved in this deal. But there is some chatter that the Bruins and Islanders are having conversations. And to some degree, the Bruins are interested in Pageau. We know the Islanders are looking at the number 7 overall pick. There's no way that would ever be a 1-for-1 trade. The Islanders would have to add something substantially better than that to get that pick. So I don't know what would all be. Some people thought maybe Dobson, but I'm like, I'm not so sure they'd do that. But, you know, to me, is he a perfect fit with the Bruins? Not really, but, you know, maybe he would be. I'm not sure what they're thinking right now. But there's definitely something going on that has potential to be a larger deal that could involve the Islanders trying to get a couple of big prospects out of this draft. If they can pull that off with what they've already got in the last year as well, between Yzerman and Ritchie, and then you got some of these other young D, and then, you know, I'm not sure how good they'll be this year. Maybe they get another high pick next year. They could easily get their prospect pool completely turned around with some high-end talent in a short time. So let me know your thoughts on all today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.